Hello, this is Dr. Dan Langley, and we're ready for another episode of Eye-Opening Discussions. What if I told you that there was a roadmap to allow you to become the person that you were always meant to be? Some ancient wisdom that could really turn the lead of your existence into the gold of who you're always meant to be. This is what we're going to be talking about today, is the art of alchemy. And literally, the art of alchemy is turning shit into gold. So, what is alchemy anyway? Alchemy is just the art of transmutation of energy. So what are we talking about here as far as energy? Well, everything that surrounds us is just energy. Nikola Tesla had a quote that said, if you want to know the power of the universe, think in terms of frequency, energy, and vibration. And so Einstein also had an equation that was E equals mc squared. And that's just a way to describe that everything in our reality, in our existence, is simply made of energy. And so learning the art of transmutation of that energy would be a valuable asset in any part of our aspect. So what is kind of the history of alchemy? Alchemy is just not isn't just ancient nonsense, but it is actually the original self-help system. And if we then think about how we present in our lives, both in a physical body, but also we have kind of an emotional body and a mental body and also a spiritual body. So as we consider all of these aspects of who we are as an individual, we can then start to use the art of transmutation of energy at those different frequency bandwidths to really start to determine if certain aspects of our physical body or our emotional body are really serving us. As they say, the alchemist would try to turn lead into gold. And it wasn't just simply on the physical plane, but that's what we're going to talk about here today as well, is because in today's New Age circle, people will talk about that the art of alchemy was simply a psychological process or a mental process. And that's true, but this type of science actually holds true for every plane of existence. And so when we talk about the physical existence, how do we transform lead into gold? Well, there are a series of steps that one must go through, and all we have to do is kind of look towards nature to see what steps the universe and or the planet Earth is going through as well. In order for us to kind of drive this point home or to make it more personalized, do we have any examples of the alchemical process in modern day life? And alchemy is everywhere. In fact, the term chemistry came from alchemy. In chemistry now, we use chemistry in making perfumes, pharmaceuticals, the gasoline that we use to power our cars. All this came from ancient alchemy. As far as the medicines that we used in ancient times, they would simply use different minerals and metallics and plant substances where they'd subject these different ingredients through an alchemical process to extract the pure essences of those individual substances, to purify them and thus recombine them to make an exalted form of a medicine that would help heal the body. Now this gets into a whole other aspect of who we are as individuals, what the planet Earth is, and each aspect of the planet and how we interact with the planet. So as far as modern medicine is concerned, the pharmaceutical industry actually stemmed from alchemy. And Paracelsus back in the 1500s would take plant medicines and process them to extract their essentials. And then he'd simply recombine those essentials to make powerful medicines that would help heal ailments. And so other examples of how alchemy is currently used in today's society is that of just psychology and inner science. I had mentioned earlier that alchemy is the art of transmuting energy into some other form of energy. And so if we think from a psychological standpoint, if we have emotions that seem to be leaden or seem to be weighing us down, whether it be previous traumas that we had, wouldn't it be great to have a type of blueprint or user's manual to convert those lower energies or those heavy leaden emotions into those of higher emotions of joy and happiness? This is kind of the beginning of what they would call the shadow work, as turning the lead or the shit of our lives into something more refined and beneficial for our lives. We also have in current biochemistry or age management medicine. In ancient times, the alchemists would try to perfect something called the elixir of life or the philosopher's stone. The elixir of life was simply a super refined essence of creation that would help heal the body's ailments. So whatever malady was causing us problems and or dis-ease in our body, we'd simply utilize the elixir of life to make our body more easeful. And so alchemy was the predecessor to modern medicine. And Carl Jung had stated, he said, alchemy is the art of liberating parts of the psyche from the subconscious. He also said that if we fail to make the parts of our subconscious conscious, then they will rule our life and we'll call it fate. And so kind of digging up the dross and the waste products of our psychology and or our body, we can then subject those essentials to the alchemical process and refine those so that they can be more of an asset to have a more refined existence. Another way to kind of think about this is if we think about our body as the lead, how can we now convert the lead of our body into the gold of our higher self? And so whether we just see ourselves as physical beings, how do we now start to understand that we're more than just physical beings? And how do we now kind of ignite the fire within our spirit and our soul to become the best version of who we were meant to be? The way that I describe alchemy is it's in a 7-stage process. The first stage of alchemy is called calcination. And this is about fire and brimstone. This is like, how can we now take our life and subject it to the heat of our emotions or of our anger and frustration to burn away what's not important, to reveal more essentials that are dwelling within. Alchemists in the past would do their work by attempting to isolate the essentials from any type of substance here. And so they would typically call it the body, or they call it the salt, the sulfur, and the mercury. The salt is our physical body. It's our corporeal form. It's the minerals and physical elements that kind of make up our body. The sulfur was considered kind of the soul of any subject. It was a fiery masculine principle that was contained within every substance on the planet. Or I apologize, it was a fiery substance that was held within every aspect of the universe. And then we had the mercury, which happened to be the spirit. This would be the interface between the physical realm and the soul realm that would help blend the salt and the sulfur through the intermediary of mercury. And once these individual essentials were isolated and refined, they could be recombined. So the first stage that we talked about was calcination. And in laboratory alchemy, what calcination is simply the burning away of the non-essential components of any type of structure. So say you take a plant, say you take a rosemary, and you're trying to isolate some of the individual components within there. Well, one way that you could do that is just simply subject it to fire. And so you burn away all the carbon and the water, et cetera, to reveal the essential ingredients which were inside. From a emotional standpoint, this was simply subjecting our self to a calcination process that would burn away any extraneous masks that we would wear to interact in the world, and the results would kind of reveal the true essence of who we are. So this could mean that we could simply stop pretending to be someone that we weren't, and we could start living more authentically. The next step after calcination was dissolution. So after the fire stage, then the product would simply be subject to a bath. It would take a baptism. And so the water would simply kind of be the emotional aspect of washing away any impurities that remain. In laboratory alchemy, the dissolution phase is simply kind of washing away any of the burnt carbon that may be there, allowing the essentials that were contained within the ash that was previously calcined to be removed from its burnt body and allow the salts of that plant to be sequestered away or to be removed into the water to help purify it. Calcination and dissolution were all both purification processes to just simply get rid of the impurities that may remain. We may find that in our lives, we find that this is a common occurrence when we just simply want to have a good cry. You know, sometimes we're feeling so bad that we're overwhelmed emotionally that sometimes just having a good cry will wash away some things that just aren't as important as we thought they were before we had that cry. You know, the calcination process, we get really heated and we get angry with how our life is or how someone treats us. And so that anger is important. And then also it's important to kind of wash away any impurities there with just a good baptism or washing away through the dissolution process. And once we have now separated some of these impurities from the essentials, now we have to separate the impurities or the aspects of our body or our soul and our mind that just aren't quite serving us well. So the third process of alchemy is just separation. And so what would happen in the laboratory alchemy is once we'd burned the product to ash, we'd then wash it to purify it as well, purifying by fire and by water. And then we'd separate it through a fractionation filter, or we just simply let it separate out by densities. And then we'd pour off the dross or the portions of that substance that just weren't necessary. And what we were left with were three purified essences of our body, or the salt, the mineral salt, the essential oils of a plant or the essential oils of ourselves, and then the spirit. So now we have a purified spirit, a purified soul, and a purified body. And so once we've isolated those three essentials, now comes the fourth part of the stage of alchemy, which is just the conjunction. So now we take the purified essences, the body, the soul, and the spirit, and we simply recombine those. And in previous episodes, we talked about what those essences actually are. The soul is simply a representation of the masculine aspect of who we are as an individual. It's the active form. It's about doing something in our life to take control of the situation. Whereas the salt aspect of our existence, or the mineral salt of our existence, is simply the receiving vessel for that. It's passive, it nurtures, it provides structure. And by combining these two substances, the soul and then the body, the masculine and the feminine principles, and then allowing those two to mix with each other through the spirit, which is the mercury of the alchemical process, then those can start to form a new identity where we take the purified essentials and we recombine them to create something new that is more purified and more exalted and is in a higher vibrational state than what was previously created. After the conjunction process comes a process called fermentation. And we're familiar with fermentation as it's the process in most of our lives that has produced beer and wine and any other alcoholic beverages. And so the process occurs through a dark, moist process that as the material begins to kind of degenerate, some of the other impurities start to kind of fall by the wayside. And what bubbles up from that process of fermentation is an exalted form of the essence that was there before. So only through the fermentation process can really the spirit of any type of subject be liberated from that. It can't be liberated through fire, it can't be liberated through water, or separation. The fermentation process is what really truly allows the essence of a subject to kind of percolate out into the open. Then we move into a process called distillation. And within that distillation process, the liberated spirit of any subject then needs to be collected. As we collected before through the process of calcination and dissolution and separation, we collected the soul and the body of the subject. And now we have a chance to concentrate the spirit of the subject. The next phase after distillation is coagulation. Here's where we take, like I said, the purified aspects of our leaden soul, and we now give them the opportunity to grow and germinate together. This is an aspect of ourself, but now of our higher self, or more of our golden self. And so back when Pokemon first came out, I was a big Pokemoner. As an eye doctor, it's like, are you having trouble seeing? Come let me take a Pikachu. And examples of this is that, in Pokemon, it's like you're now respawned as to like a golden version, shiny version of yourself, where all the previous concerns and cares that you had have simply kind of melted away. And now you're focused and with purpose. And so you don't really need anybody's approval anymore. You're more authentic. You have a vision for your life and for those around you, and you stick towards your purpose. And others may not quite understand, but if they've gone through the alchemical process, then they would understand. So coagulation is an aspect of kind of self-realization or self-actualization. It's allowed you to take the important pieces of who you are, purify them, and then recombine them. It's a process of becoming whole again. In a fractured world where we're all embroiled and taught kind of separateness, this is an aspect where we can kind of practice bringing ourselves back together. It allows the revelation of the internal gold that has always been there. We just now have kind of actualized it. So alchemy isn't about being someone else. It's about removing everything that isn't you to reveal who you want to truly be. I wore my shirt today because I was super jazzed about this topic, and I'm looking forward to exploring certain aspects of alchemy in more in depth, such as the history of alchemy, more in-depth study about how each phase works and how it ties into, you know, the stars and the sun and the moon, how it really influences our mental and emotional well-being. And so I'm very grateful that you took the time to spend with us today so you could learn a little bit more about this topic that's very important to me. And I hope you join us next time on Eye-Opening Discussions.